Moving on now to corruption news. Political corruption is back, baby! Corruption has made its way back into the news cycle, and we have been looking back over some of our old friends and some of their best shady behaviour. The first corrupt cab off the rank, the UK's favourite party boy, Boris Johnson. A new report has found Boris Johnson deliberately misled UK Parliament over Partygate. The report will be the cover story for magazine as part of their No Shit Spectacular. A committee of UK lawmakers harshly rebuked former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, saying he lied to Parliament about lockdown flouting parties and was complicit in a campaign to intimidate those investigating his conduct during the coronavirus pandemic. The House of Commons Privileges Committee found Johnson's actions were such a flagrant violation of the rules that they warranted a 90-day suspension from Parliament, where he still served after stepping down as Prime Minister last year. The committee's sanction would have been more than enough to trigger a by-election that could have cost Johnson his seat in Parliament. But he definitely avoided that by resigning after the committee gave him advance notice of its findings. Johnson repeated his claim that the panel was a kangaroo court bent on ousting him from Parliament. And it might just be, because it is a delicious surprise to see him sort of see consequences. Rishi Sunak has desperately tried to shift attention away from Johnson since he took office in October. A near impossible task, as Sunak no doubt found Johnson is in fact an attention-seeking black hole. Instead of sucking in matter, he sucks in the attention of all those around him and manages to compress their intelligence to a singularity. If you aren't familiar with the Partygate scandal, as you live in a country other than the UK and have your own terrible parliamentarians to focus on, that's fine. Members of Johnson's staff held a series of parties in 2020 and 2021 when parties were prohibited by pandemic restrictions that he himself put in place. The Partygate scandal angered the public, not French levels of angry public, but for a British public, they were pretty outwardly flustered, and that is a very big sign. Johnson initially denied that any parties took place, then reportedly assured lawmakers that pandemic rules and guidance were followed at all times at the parties it turned out did happen, despite his denying they existed earlier. The committee concluded that those assurances were misleading and that Johnson failed to correct the record when asked to do so. This amounted to a serious contempt of Parliament. The committee concluded Johnson committed 5 contempts of Parliament, including misleading the Commons and the cross-party group investigating him. Only 7 MPs voted against the report, as opposed to the 354 who voted for it. 354 to 7. Those are bad results. I haven't seen a more lopsided result since Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson started his tug-of-war league where he battled exclusively against teams of primary school children. I don't know what he is trying to prove taking on those children. Maybe the anger of Black Adam not working out is manifesting in some weird ways. Just make another jungle-based adventure film, Dwayne. People love those, and I don't think they can tell them apart, so just keep doing that forever. So of course, Boris resigned in a classic "you can't fire me if I quit" outburst. Now, had he not resigned, a suspension of 10 days or more would have allowed Johnson's constituents to circulate a recall petition to oust him from the House of Commons. The committee found that Johnson's misleading statements warranted a suspension long enough to trigger such a recall petition. And despite all this being voted against, he is, if nothing else, a party man to the end, falling on his COVID nasal swab and saving the party from losing an election. However, because he resigned, he will be punished. And from what I hear, it's a real doozy. So what do we have? Fines? Loss of privileges? Jail time? What could it possibly be? A motion was passed that said he should be blocked from receiving a parliamentary pass. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, we got him! That sounds bad. What's that? What does that mean? It sounds real bad though. It must be bad given the scale of vitriol from his compatriots. No? So what is that? What's that? It's a pass given to most ex-MPs which allows unfiltered access to the parliamentary estate. And he doesn't get it? And that's everything. Really? You sure there's nothing else? Are we on delay? Losing his pass simply means that he must be accompanied by another member if he wants to enter Parliament's buildings. But he's still able to access his entitlement to public funding for legal support if he's sued over decisions that he took whilst in government, or something that it seems he will probably need at some point. And his former prime ministerial entitlement, a yearly £115,000 allowance to support his special position in public life. Yeah, he still gets all that. Yeah. Fuck. Oh, this punishment is symbolic. Oh, it's symbolic. Okay. Well, why didn't you just say that in the first place? That's what I was worried about. His symbolic status. And symbolically, this represents a thunderous repudiation of Boris by his former peers, apparently. Well, then I look forward to the same symbolic anger being applied to people receiving the UK equivalent of job seeker when they do something wrong on purpose and then lie about it multiple times. The rules have just changed. Looks like deception is back on the menu. Boris, of course, called the investigation a witch hunt, as is standard, but it seems that he had no need to wail and complain except for victim peacocking status, virtue signalling, if you will. But it seems he needn't have bothered based on the consequences laid out here. But arguably, a symbolic punishment needs a symbolic repudiation so we can be symbolically placated. That makes sense, right? And if you don't get it, well, obviously, you're just too stupid to understand the symbolism of it all. It's very deep and it's very clever, alright? But we are doing our own corruption tango here in Australia. Do we have two corrupt feet? Let's find out. Let's not fuck it up. Come on! So it seems the results of the Independent Commission Against Corruption investigation into Gladys Berejiklian is done. And oh boy, is the soap operification of politics back, baby! The ICAC found Gladys had taken steps to award government grants in a desire on her part to maintain or advance her relationship with former state MP Daryl Maguire. Ooh, Gladys and Daryl sitting in a gun club, KISSING. First comes the telling your work colleagues, then comes funding grants, then comes Daryl with a corruption charge. Ooh. More than $5 million was announced for a gun club that Maguire had been pushing for in his electorate of Wagga Wagga. The report also ruled that Berejiklian's actions over the Riverina Conservatorium of Music were influenced by a desire on her part to maintain or advance that relationship. $5 million for a gun club, Gladys. Most people just go with a fancy dinner, maybe get some jewelry or do a sex act that they normally wouldn't be interested in. $5 million of taxpayer money is definitely a distinct and unique gift. I will give you credit for that. The 688-page report found the former Premier turned Optus Employee of the Month engaged in serious, corrupt conduct and breached the public's trust. The Commission also faulted her for not disclosing her relationship with Maguire and for failing to report any suspicions she had about Maguire's activities to the ICAC, saying Ms. Berejiklian submitted to the Commission that, as Premier, the ministerial code did not apply to her. Which is an interesting take on rules and laws, because you are either confessing you don't understand the job you held, which brings forward the fundamental question of why anyone thought it was appropriate to give it to you in the first place, or more realistically, you were lying to save yourself, which means that you were deliberately deceiving the public and therefore not qualified for the job or any large positions of responsibility. So you choose, Gladys. I suppose it's only fair. Which one is it, Gladys? So what happens next? Jail time? Paying the money back? Well, the ICAC has not called for criminal prosecution of the former Premier. Though it will seek advice from the Director of Public Prosecutions over a case against Maguire. So I guess that's something. Why? We all scream as another politician deftly dodges justice. Well, in this case, at least the reasoning is clearer. In its report, counsel assisting the commission submitted that as Berejiklian gave her evidence under objection, meaning it would not be admissible against her in a criminal prosecution. So, see, the ICAC has powers to compel people to give evidence that may incriminate them. However, that evidence can't actually be used in criminal proceedings. Geoffrey Watson, a director at the Centre for Public Integrity, said the reason why an ICAC finding of corrupt conduct doesn't necessarily equate to grounds for a criminal prosecution is rooted in the reasons behind the establishment of the corruption watchdog, saying, the theoretical framework for an anti-corruption body is to go into areas where the police can't, and ICAC was established with a power to compel unwilling witnesses to give evidence, something our criminal justice system cannot do. Police cannot compel Berejiklian to provide the same evidence. Whereas Maguire was a bit stupid about it all, leaving a trail to follow as large as a Bigfoot stomping through wet concrete. Well, what about her job now? I mean, even PwC has been letting go of partners in the wake of its recent scandal. Surely Optus doesn't want this sort of scandal lingering over them. Well, ICAC's findings of serious corrupt conduct will likely have little effect on Gladys's career. Optus actually went on to say they won't be punishing Gladys Berejiklian for her ICAC corruption judgment, saying, man, it's why we hired her in the first place, and you know it. In response, Berejiklian has said, serving the people of New South Wales was an honour and a privilege. At all times, I've worked my hardest in the public interest. And she was kind of right. Once this came to the public, they were very interested. The public and the ICAC. They love a good drama that they can understand, at least, or one that they can relate to. Okay, so Gladys will only see some symbolic punishment. Surely someone will see consequences for something that they did. What about Stuart Robert, huh? That guy's fucked up a lot. Surely something's going to happen to him. After all, according to a statement to the Parliament's Audit Committee, the lobbying firm Synergy 360 proposed a structure designed to allow Stuart Robert to profit from government contracts that he helped with for his clients. Well, that's pretty corrupt. Are they openly confessing? What's the go here? Robert, of course, immediately rejected the allegation in the strongest possible terms, noting that it was made only under parliamentary privilege in an affidavit-style submission to a parliamentary inquiry, which affords them the legal protection of parliamentary privilege and keeps their maker safe from a defamation action. Which is just chef's kiss, you know? Doesn't it just suck when someone uses a system that you abused against you? Must suck for you, old Stewie boy. He said there was zero evidence in the submission, a thing that he would absolutely say despite having done a number of reprehensible things in his time in Parliament, including pushing through and doubling down on the rubber debt, despite his personal misgivings while the government sought legal advice, which he denied was wrongdoing in the administration of the program. I think maybe the issue here is with his definition of wrongdoing. Seems he has a fundamental misunderstanding of what that refers to. It doesn't mean have you done the right thing by you and your bank account. It means, have you done the right thing towards your electorate and the large Australian population as a whole? You understand, Stu? Stu, baby? You get it? Anthony Daly, the former personal and business partner of Synergy 360, said that on September 8, 2017, the company's co-owner, David Milo, organised a meeting with former executive director Cam Zasavana to propose a transfer 20% of her shares to United Marketing, controlled by an individual named John Magirison. Magirison was the chair of Roberts Fadden Forum, a political fundraising vehicle that donated $30,000 each to two of Mr. Roberts' former staff members, including Kristen Boulton, who was running as an independent. And again, here comes Roberts saying that the donations were to stop the ALP from gaining a foothold in the Gold Coast, admitting there should have been more transparency in using LNP funds for candidates who portrayed themselves as independent candidates. Oh, you think people might be interested in the minutiae of the financial fuckery that drives the wheels of Parliament? Well, they aren't, not often anyway, unless it's a juicy soap opera. But they still deserve a system that is better. At least this is better than his usual response of just saying, oh yeah, I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. There appears to be a tinge of acknowledgement of doing something wrong, just a tinge. But this was in 2017, so he probably allowed that to be crushed out of him with the heavy bags of money that he'd been getting away with receiving all of these years. Anthony Daly said ultimately this arrangement was designed to facilitate the flow of funds through United Marketing and onward to Stuart Robert. The main objective of this arrangement was to secure Stuart Roberts' involvement and support in acquiring federal government contracts. Stuart Roberts' political influence and connections within the government sector were deemed crucial in ensuring favourable outcomes. Daly said meetings would be organised after parliamentary hearings in Canberra and was told by Zasavana the majority of these meetings were deliberately omitted from Roberts' parliamentary diary to maintain confidentiality and avoid public awareness. The last thing any politician needs is an aware public. They hate being prodded from their daily drudgery to be forced to pay attention to some fuckery that a politician is doing. It does require a lot of reading, and I want to complain about my own shit for a minute, you know? God. Daly claimed in a statement that in 2018, Milo told him that Robert, then Minister for Human Social Services, had directed Centrelink leases towards properties owned by one of Magirison's companies, resulting in favourable terms such as high rents and long lease durations. This arrangement also extended to Magirison's health companies in relation to the NDIS. Which is strange, because Roberts said that he didn't believe that he'd ever met Mr. Daly or spoken to him. Maybe it's all a misunderstanding. Maybe Stuart Roberts' desperation to draw attention to frauders in the Centrelink system, despite personal misgivings about how the debts were generated, are a desperate attempt to draw attention away from his own misdeeds, creating a pile of frauds and deception that the media can dig through when looking for a story in the future, and conveniently creating a smokescreen in Google search engines when you do a Google search for keywords Centrelink and misuse of funds. But who could say? Who could say such a thing? Bill Shorten said a review by former public servant Dr. Ian Watt found 19 of 95 procurements had real deficiencies. The committee had heard evidence from Magirison that in 2017 he had instructed his accountant to direct Synergy 360 profits derived from Commonwealth contracts to a trust to which Mr. Robert was a beneficiary. Stuart Robert is very much turning out to be the Michael Jordan of government contracts in that he didn't make his money from his actual job, but raked in millions from those side deals. Turns out, he's been the Minister for Side Hustles this whole time. The structure involved a trust being established where Synergy 360 would deposit funds. Robert would then receive payments including a 1% success fee derived from the value of any project and a monthly retainer of between $10,000 and $20,000. The committee heard that he had emailed his accountant to say, anything that comes in from this in the future, I will end up putting to Australian Property Trust, the same amount that comes in. Robert was a shareholder in the trust until 2018. Then, of course, smelling blood in the water, the rat, Robert, started preparations for abandoning the sinking ship, announcing his retirement from the Gold Coast seat of Fadden in May, triggering a by-election which will be held on the 15th of July. Quite fortunately and coincidentally, the Robodebt Royal Commission is due to report on the 7th of July after the Attorney General granted it a 1-week extension that would allow it to make referrals to the National Anti-Corrupt Committee. A wonderful stroke of fun, which may also take a moment to see some results, as the NAC has received some more than 40 referrals after becoming operational for only 2 days. Woo! When asked what he'd missed the most about being a parliament, Robert said, the side hustles, obviously, which for a man trying to maintain his innocence seems like a bit of a foolish error.